So for those of you who don't know, horror and survival horror are my favourite genre of games to play, and I want to slowly change my channel towards that kind of content. So I thought today I would review a survival horror title, if that's what you'd even call this game, that game being Maid of Sker. Also, yes, I am saying scare and not Sker because that's how they pronounce it in the game, so that's how I'm going to pronounce it as well. So Maid of Sker was released in 2020 and it released on the PS4, Xbox One, PC and the Nintendo Switch. The version of the game you're seeing is the Nintendo Switch version of the game. The game was published and developed by Wales Interactive, who at the time were a company made of 10 people, and I believe now they're up to 15, so it's a very, very small development team that made this game. And a development team of that size made this game is actually very impressive because the game is surprisingly well polished and optimized, which is something you don't even see from the larger game studio, so that is very impressive to see from an indie development team. The story in Maid of Sker is a retelling of a Welsh folklore and also a book also by the same name. The story pretty much follows Elizabeth Williams, who is imprisoned in the Sker house by her father to stop her from marrying the man she loved, and the game follows a similar story, as in the game you play as her said lover named Thomas Evans, who is a musician, and at the start of the game he receives a letter from Elizabeth that asks him to come to the Sker hotel and save her from her imprisonment. While Thomas is on Sker Island, he discovers that the inhabitants of the island as well as the hotel have been transformed into monsters with no faces, but by reading notes and listening to gramophones he learns that a cult is active on the island, and this can be connected with the strange behaviour of its inhabitants. Not much of the story is present through the game's cutscenes, however, as if you just watched them by the end of the game you could be a bit confused. The main bulk of the story is given to players through optional documents that are scattered throughout the game's locations. Additionally, when you save the game, which in this game it takes the form of a gramophone, you're given a recording which gives players insight into Elizabeth's family history. The only character you quote-unquote talk to in the game is Elizabeth, and you do this by finding phones that are scattered throughout the hotel which connects to where Elizabeth is. You don't talk to her per se, you just press a dialogue box and Elizabeth will respond, as the main protagonist of this game is actually silent. Once you've made it through the game, there are actually two different endings. I'm not going to talk about them here, but what I will say is one of the endings directly links to the game's sort of sequel, being Sker Ritual, which I do want to talk about at some point. So if you want to see that video, leave a like and subscribe so you will be notified when that video eventually goes live. The gameplay of Maid of Sker takes heavy inspiration from Outlast, as the game is first person and has no combat, and all you have to do is run and hide from enemies. However, the main mechanic in the game is holding your breath, which you use to avoid choking and alerting enemies to your position. The enemies in this game are blind, so obviously they cannot see you, but they can still hear you, and the best way to avoid them I found is to just crouch walk past them. Around halfway through the game you are given a device which acts as kind of like a noise bomb which can temporarily stun all the enemies in a small radius. I didn't find myself using this weapon much, as for almost all encounters I just stealth past all the enemies, and the ammo for this item is quite scarce, but depending on the difficulty you will get more or less. If an enemy does catch you, they will hit you and do some damage, but they are easy to evade if you just sprint away. If you do get hit, then you can heal using the bottles you find throughout the game. Just like the ammo for the weapon, those are not the most common things you find in the game. There are puzzles in this game, but for the most part they are more logic puzzles and are fairly straightforward and require you to activate switches that releases locks so you can open a door. There was one puzzle that myself and quite a few people had trouble with, and that was the one for one of the cylinders on Sker Point. As to get the cylinder you need to ring the bells in a specific order, and either I missed a clue for the puzzle or the game just didn't tell you, and the first time I came across it I assumed I couldn't solve the puzzle, so I walked away. I actually got through the whole next portion of the game, and then when I answered the next phone call from Elizabeth, my character was like, oh, I got another cylinder, which I didn't, so I actually had to look up the answer online, realize I could solve the puzzle, backtrack and solve it. For most of the game you'll be exploring the Sker Hotel, and it is a reasonable size for a game of this scope, I guess. Like older survival horror games, you can create shortcuts that make getting around the hotel much easier. In regards to the other locations you explore, they're kind of like a one and done, as you really only go through them once, but the hotel is kind of like the central location you keep coming back to throughout the game. Presentation wise, I found the game to be quite dark while I was exploring, but I was playing the Nintendo Switch port of the game, and the Switch port isn't the prettiest version of the game out there. That would be the PC version, but considering that the game was made by 10 devs, I'm going to let that slide. And as the game is also set at night time, it can be quite dark at times, and the darkness does a good job at hiding the lower quality textures quite well. But those are my thoughts on Maid of Sker. If you like this video, please leave a like, and like I mentioned previously, if you want to see me review the game's semi-sequel Scare Ritual, then please leave a comment down below. I'd also love to hear what you guys think on Maid of Sker down below as well. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.